So here I am thinking to myself, man, ain't no way in hell this show is going to be able to top the Invincible War or Conquest's arrival and the battles between him and Mark. The destruction will never be matched with what we saw in Chicago in Season 1 or the destruction of Thraxa in Season 2, but here we are. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my breakdown of Invincible Season 4, Episode 7, which as of right now might be the most insane episode of the series so far. Look man, this episode gave us Thragg versus the Coalition and it was nothing short of epic. And then you go ahead and throw in the end of Viltrum. Oh yeah, this was peak Invincible. Man, we got a lot to discuss, so let's break it all down. Full spoilers ahead. We open this epic episode with a flashback to a planet under the rule of Viltrumites, and for the third time in a week, this alien species is rebelling against the Empire by sabotaging their mining operations. We see Krieg suggest they punish this species in a form of showcasing the Viltrumite strength over them, but Thetis suggests otherwise. Thetis says that they're only resisting them because of the cruelty they've shown them and the fear they have over them. We see the back and forth between these two Viltrumites and their philosophical differences on how the galaxy should be ran, but Emperor Argal interrupts their debate and wants to hear Thragg's opinion. Thragg agrees with Krieg. Punishment is needed as a form of education, and because of their weakness, it's an offense to the natural order of the universe, and Emperor Argal is in agreement. As we see, the Emperor gives the orders to reduce the species population by 25%, and if they continue to rebel, they'll erase their entire existence. This was the final straw, in the moment that Thetis knew that his kind had shown barbaric ways, and he needed to end this, and he knew it was time to act. We see Thragg speaking to his emperor about how Thetis was once like them, a ruthless warrior who fought by his side and was the strongest amongst them. But after a long campaign away from Viltrum, Thetis returned changed, speaking of mercy and questioning their ways. Emperor Argal suggests that Thragg take action, but Thragg hesitates, and maybe because he had some respect for Thetis. I want you all to pay attention to this moment because I believe this was a moment that always replays in Thragg's head. If he would have did what the Emperor suggested into investigating Thetis, he might have stopped Thetis, he might have killed him, and the rest is history. But since he hesitated, since he showed a moment of weakness, it ended up costing him so much more. Later that night, the assassination happens. In the shadows, Thetis, the future leader of the coalition of planets, makes his move, a move against his own kind, as he assassinates Emperor Argal by putting a blade through his skull. Cut to the Emperor's funeral, where Thragg shares some words to the rest of the Empire about the strength their fallen Emperor has shown them, and that the traitor will be found soon enough. We watch as Thragg tests the Viltrumites' loyalty by asking one of them if he'll ever betray him one day, and maybe based on this Viltrumite's tone or their mood or the way they answered his question, he decides to make an example out of him as we watch Thragg chop this Viltrumite's head clean off. Thragg is now the de facto emperor until one of Argal's blood heirs is found, as he issues his first command. He wants to eradicate the weakness that allowed a traitor to rise. As we witness the Viltrumites, even the kids, brutally turning on one another, fighting to the death in a horrifying survival of the fittest purge in the most brutal and violent ways as we see blood raining from the sky. Now we watch as Thragg walks into the throne room as the carnage is complete. Now we have this moment here where Conquest shows like a brief moment of defiance, but he ultimately bows down to his new emperor, Thragg. Thragg's reign of terror has officially begun with a vow to never fail his past emperor again. This was a great flashback, a great backstory for Thragg, because not only does it explain Thetis' motivations, but also Thragg's unwavering absolute commitment to the Viltrumites and their ideal of how they show strength above all. Flash forward to Thetis confirming to the others that Thragg has retreated back to Viltrum with only a few of his loyalists, waiting reinforcements that are still days away, making this the perfect opportunity to strike. Now, Alan shares his concerns that by killing Thragg, it will only make the rest of the Viltrumites want to seek out revenge, but Thetis assures him that they'll be lost, they'll be directionless, and they'll fight against themselves like they did before, and eventually they'll just fall one by one. Meanwhile, we see Mark recording a message for Eve back on Earth, speaking of their upcoming battle and their advantages in numbers, but he also shares his fears in Thragg. He even mentions that Nolan isn't confident about facing him, but we see Mark stops and deletes the message. Now he's confident that he's going to make his return back to Eve and Earth and that she'll never hear this and she'll never hear his fears about Thragg. Now the rest of the team of Zoe, Alan, Battle Beast debate Thragg's legacy and the hype around him as Alan tries to lift their spirits by suggesting they eat before the battle. Speaking of battle, we see my man Battle Beast in a rare moment of agreement as he does suggest that they do eat.
Open is correct. We must nourish ourselves before battle. Later, we will feast on our enemies' entrails, or they on ours.
Because as we can see in the vibe and the tension in the room, that this might be their last meal. Now off to the side, we see Nolan and Thetis having a conversation as we know that Thetis' ultimate goal isn't just to defeat Thragg, it's to end all Viltrumites altogether. We can see that Nolan fears for Mark and Oliver, who are obviously half Viltrumites, and I would imagine that Nolan is afraid that Thetis will be using that new version of the Scourge virus and thinking of his next move that if we take care of Thragg, I'm going to probably have to take care of Thetis to protect my sons. But as we will see later, that concern is put to rest. As Mark, Oliver, Zoe, Alan, Battle Beast, and Thetis prepare for the fight of their lives, we see Nolan pulls Mark and Oliver aside. He lets them know about Thragg's strength and it is beyond anything they've ever faced. He tells them do not under any circumstance let him get them alone because they will not survive. Now it's important that you all realize that there is a particular member of this team that is absent, but they will be making a very big impact later in this episode. Now, as the team approach Viltrum, Nolan explains the dead Viltrumites' bodies surrounding the planet to Oliver and how they're going to be using this as a tactical advantage as camouflage. But the Viltrumites are already there and hiding amongst their own dead, waiting to ambush the attack. We watch as Thragg is floating in space, ready as well, as the fight begins with Thula stabbing Thetis. It's an all-out war from here, ladies and gentlemen. We got Thetis versus Thula. We got Nolan versus Anissa. We got Battle Beast fighting anyone he can get his hands on. And it's time to see if that liquid from the shells of those bug-like creatures work as Zoe hits one of the Viltrumites with it. And we see Alan punches a Viltrumite through his stomach into his face, killing him. So yeah, the liquid works. Meanwhile, Mark and Oliver fight Lucan as Krieg and Thetis fight. Now, while all this craziness is going on, Thragg watches from afar as the Viltrumites start to get the upper hand until the secret weapon arrives with their game-changing weapon, and it's the one and only Space Racer. Now, he's not by himself. To make his entrance even more badass, he's got maybe 7 or 8 Ragnars chained up to his bike and unleashes them, and they immediately rip through the Viltrumites like toilet paper. Now, Nolan sees his opportunity to attack Thragg as Nolan swings with everything he has, but Thragg literally moves like a fraction of an inch as he catches Nolan with a strike that feels like a nuclear detonation as Nolan is launched into the Viltrum surface. Thragg arrives and wants to talk to an old friend. He's showing a lot of restraint. He's showing a lot of patience. Again, I think this is very important to the backstory that we got at the beginning of this episode. When we saw Thragg getting upset, he wiped out so many Viltrumites, but now he's a little bit more calm. He knows their numbers are low, so he's showing restraint in this conversation. He wants Nolan to come home and all will be forgiven. Nolan calls Viltrum a tomb as Thragg again has to stay calm and calms himself down and says that they will restore Viltrum and they will also restore their rightful place within the galaxy. Thragg brings up the sins of Thetis and questions how could Nolan fight along someone who's killed billions of their own kind. Now Nolan brings up the attacks against his sons as we see Thragg reminds Nolan that it's all a part of their ritual to be tested. Thragg brings up Thetis yet again and questions if he would be kind to his sons if he wins this war. Now Nolan, already having his doubts about Thetis, acknowledges his concerns, but he says it doesn't change anything. Now in the throne room, we see Thragg tells Nolan that fighting with Thetis is like fighting for his own destruction and of him and his own family. Nolan tries to reason with Thragg and he wants him to agree to whatever terms the coalition offers, which we know is a lie because Thetis only wants to eliminate them. But it was at this point that Thragg has had enough of trying to convince Nolan to join their side again. Now, at this point, Thragg has had enough. He's tried his best. He's tried to reason with Nolan, but now the games are over. It was at this point that the episode literally punched itself into another gear. As Thragg and Nolan come face to face, Thragg tells Nolan that it pains him of the death of any Viltrumite. It leaves a void inside of him as he does this Dragon Ball Z Avatar Airbender move as he summons the wind around him and he pulls Nolan closer to him, punching Nolan into goddamn space. That moment of him punching Nolan into space again, in my opinion, is the most dominant display of strength that we've ever seen in this show. Now, back to the battle. Before Nolan got punched back into space, Space Racer's helmet gets compromised by getting attacked by 3 Viltrumites, but we see Alan and Zoe help him, and Zoe fixes his helmet, but we see Thragg, who's now ready to get into the more battle. But I will say before moving on, if I were to have a nitpick or like an issue or a complaint about this battle or this episode in general, it's what we just witnessed with Space Racer. I don't know in what world would the Viltrumites, 3 Viltrumites just standing there as his mask is all destroyed. Why wouldn't they attack him, kill him, I know they can't touch his weapon, but why would the Viltrumites just stand there waiting for someone to come fight them? It was a weird moment. Again, it was very quick, obviously. I know, it's a split decision, but we know how quick Viltrumites think, and they're trained warriors. So again, if I had a nitpick, if I had a complaint, it was watching those 3 Viltrumites just stand around Space Racer, knowing how destructive he is, and not just him, but his goddamn weapon. So I thought that moment, again, it was literally, 2 seconds, but it was a moment that stood out to me because everything else in this episode was pretty much damn perfect. But that moment there did catch me because I'm like, what in the world are these Viltrumites doing? But now our little friend Oliver's inexperience finally catches up to him as Oliver doesn't listen and tries to land a punch on Thragg, but he ends up catching his punch, breaking Oliver's hand. He hits him and knocks off his piece of his jaw, and he rips off his arm all at the same damn time. Now, Mark sees this and goes after Oliver, but Thragg grabs Mark and tosses him in the opposite direction. Thragg tells Mark that Oliver was a failure, he's not his brother, as Mark responds by saying that, I already killed Conquest and I'm gonna kill you too, as Thragg looks at him and says, oh yeah? Well, show me what you got. All right, again, I want to reiterate that this episode already was just operate on all levels. It was amazing, it was epic, it was incredible. But then somehow it managed to go beyond that, which is just insane to me. We see Mark throws a haymaker at Thragg, and Thragg headbutts the punch without moving an inch. And then to make matters even better, the frame capturing Thragg's face, and it shows him as a literal goddamn demon, and that was more frightening than Satan that we met in episode 4.
I'm not impressed.
Meanwhile, Nolan's still flying in space after getting punched, but he finally slows down. He sees Oliver, but at the same time, he notices a window of opportunity. The others still in battle. Battle Beast and Krieg briefly fight. We got Zoe runs out of the bug ammo, and poor Mark is being tossed around like a rag doll by Thragg. Now, speaking of being tossed around, we see my man Battle Beast tries to hit Thragg, but is told no and gets his jetpack ripped off and tossed into deep space, and he's no longer in the battle. Now, Nolan, back in action, rallies the others and tells them to charge Viltrum, which is now at its most vulnerable moment. Mark realizes what Nolan wants to do, and surprisingly, he says no. Like, I'm very surprised why Mark, did he not want to see the planet destroyed? I really wish we could have had a moment to explore that, but obviously they're in the middle of battle. But while that's happening, Nolan orders Space Racer to destroy their planet, and he shoots, and Thragg isn't fast enough to stop him. Nolan, Mark, and Thetis follow the shot into a tight formation as it hits the planet's core, destroying Viltrum. Watching the 3 of them flying into the planet's core is one of the coolest sequences and one of the most insane moments, in my opinion, of the show. The impact is it just shatters the planet, and not only does the impact overcome the planet's gravitational energy, but we see their suits being ripped off and they're still flying as the planet is no more. Now, the impact sends everyone flying into space, and Thetis says that this was the only way to show them the truth, as we see everyone, the generals, the soldiers, both sides are just in shock. Now, Thetis calls for a surrender, but out of the rubble, Thragg, with tears in his eyes, screams no and chooses death as he flies directly at Thetis. And remember what I said about Thetis maybe being a threat to Nolan? Well, we see Thragg rips his head from his body, smashing it, avenging his emperor, and immediately goes after Nolan. Now, Mark orders Alan to find his brother as he flies towards Thragg and his father. Thragg beats Nolan as Mark catches them, but is quickly dismissed by Thragg. He says that he was too quick with Thetis, but he won't make that same mistake with Nolan as he hits him with a barrage of punches. Meanwhile, Alan goes 4 against 1 for a little bit, but Zoe and Space Racer help him out as they ultimately retreat back to the ship. Look, man, I love Mark. Invincible's my guy, but this moment was goddamn funny as hell, man. Thragg punches him in the throat and he's like, can't breathe. He's like choking. He's going crazy. And then he chases after Mark. And the look on Mark's face of pure horror as Thragg chases after him. Again, I love you, Mark. I can understand the fear in that moment, but man, that was funny as hell. Now, Thragg catches him, and again, Mark is scared out of his mind, but Nolan punches Thragg away. And as Mark asks his dad, like, how can we beat him, Dad? We see Nolan is about to say his son's name, and he gets his name out, but not in enough time because Thragg goes and does the classic Viltrumite move and slices through Nolan's stomach. And Mark is watching this, thinking that he just witnessed the death of his father, but Thragg immediately headbutts Mark and begins squeezing his eyes and his head. But in an even more shocking move, we see Thragg stops. Thragg sees the pieces of his planet descending into space and all the other dead Viltrumites surrounding him, and he realizes they've already are low in numbers, and he spares Mark. Again, this goes back to what he did in the flashback. This goes back to Viltrum and showing their strength and showing his resistance and being like, again, it is a crazy move, but it makes sense. They need their numbers, right? He's thinking, live to fight another day. I might not be able to get them on my side today, but maybe in the future I can. So it's a crazy move, but it makes sense if you think about it. But we see the rest of the Viltrumites, the handful of Viltrumites there, and we know they still have their reinforcements. They fly off as we see Nolan and Mark float into space after getting beaten near to death. Now, they're eventually found in space as the others are shocked they found them, and they find out that it's been a few weeks as Mark finally wakes up to find his father and Oliver are alive. Now, they can't figure out why they're alive, but their bigger problem is that nobody has an idea where Thragg and the others have gone. As of now, Alan is the leader of the coalitions until they find his replacement, but until then, his first task is to find the Viltrumites. They've seemed to have disappeared, but Mark realizes that they have gone to conquer Earth. So we know it's been a few weeks, which makes you wonder, what has the Viltrumites been doing on Earth for the past few weeks? What's going on with Debbie? What's going on with Eve? Are the Viltrumites just straight up conquering, murdering humans? Or are they trying to blend in because they have to procreate and bring back their people? Because they obviously know that Earth is a place that has the DNA that can procreate their species. So oh boy, I cannot wait to see what's been going on these last few weeks on Earth, and the finale is about to be something special. Now, speaking of special, let me know in the comments below, is this the first episode that didn't have a post-credit scene? Let me know if I'm right or if I'm wrong, but again, we didn't need a goddamn post-credit scene because that episode was freaking awesome. I've pretty much said what I had to say about this episode, but just in case you all don't get the sense of the energy and the vibes that I'm giving off right now, I don't want to speak hyperbole, but I will say for me, this is probably top 3 episodes. Like, this episode, opening with the backstory of Thetis and figuring everything out with Thragg and his resistance and him showing a moment of weakness. Again, he vowed to never show that weakness again, but he had a moment of weakness. He didn't investigate, obviously, Thetis and what that led to with his emperor, and then he showed moments of restraint. He showed moments of power. He wanted Nolan to get back into the group. He wanted to have Mark join them, but it was just time to snap, and we saw... Listen, the last few weeks, people online have been going crazy. Oh, Thragg's voice sucks. He's not intimidating, blah, blah, blah. Man, shut the hell up. What we saw Thragg do, we've never seen in the show before. The man is a goddamn beast. We literally saw Thragg dismantle Nolan like we never seen before, punching him to the surface of Viltrum, punching him back into space, killing Thetis the way that he did. Thragg, my man, I hope people apologize to you because you show why you're the most toughest, baddest, strongest Viltrumite that we've seen so far in this show. And you know what? I hope people apologize to Lee Pace because he's a great actor. He's great in the role. He showed this level of resilience, loyalty, leadership. I mean, the guy's awesome. Thragg is awesome. This episode is awesome. And I don't know what else to say, but I loved it. With that being said, that will conclude my breakdown of Invincible Season 4, Episode 7. And I want to know what you all thought. Favorite fight, favorite moment, what worked, what didn't work, what do you all hope to see in the finale? Again, the Viltrumites on Earth. We're going to get another battle. Who's going to win? Who's going to lose? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. Thank you all for watching or listening to this week's breakdown. If you're watching this on YouTube, I appreciate you all. Do me a favor, hit that like button, hit the hype button. Also, share the video, share your thoughts in the comments. And for all things Invincible, The Boys, Daredevil, Euphoria, consider sticking around and subscribing to the channel today. For my podcast listeners out there, I appreciate you all. Do me a favor, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and also consider sticking around and following the podcast, and I would love if you all can give me a 5-star review. Alrighty, y'all, I cannot wait for the finale. I love this episode. I love this show, and I appreciate all you guys' support. In the meantime, again, we'll be covering The Boys and Daredevil, so stick around and hear my thoughts about the latest episodes from those great shows. But I want to thank you all again. Don't forget, you all are awesome. Stay safe, and I'll see you again soon.